Tonight's event kicks off our 2023 public discussion forums to talk about the Great Reshuffling. The COVID-19 pandemic was much more than a shock to the world's health. It changed the face of the workforce. This shift began with the Great Resignation, with over 47 million people resigning from their job in 2021 alone. But it has now morphed into the Great Reshuffling. Employees today are not just quitting old jobs, they're making radical career and life changes, citing the importance of culture, leadership quality, corporation social engagement, and a focus on personal life outside the workplace. Both these trends hit Arizona hard. The quit rate in the state was the third highest in the nation in 2021, and Arizona remains one of the most popular states where people are now relocating under the Great Reshuffling. We are very lucky to have Jay Nordlinger moderating our discussion tonight. Jay is a senior editor for the National Review, where he writes about various subjects, including politics, foreign affairs, and the arts. Jay's latest book is Children of Monster, an inquiry into the sons and daughters of dictators. He's also the author of Peace They Say, a history of the Nobel Peace Prize. Please welcome our moderator, Jay Nordlinger.
Well, hello, everybody. What a museum and what a beautiful day. February in Tucson is something like heaven, right? I understand July might be a little different, but thank you so much. And I'm so grateful for the Center for the Philosophy of Freedom. What a good idea. I mean, freedom too, but I was talking about the center. And Saura and Simone add a touch of Italy here in the American Southwest, which is just wonderful. Should our all-star panel take seats? Please, and I'll introduce them when they're, but applaud anyway, yes. Well, here are our three gurus for the afternoon or evening. And in the middle is our U of A person, our wildcat. She is Helena Rodrigues, a vice president of the university and Chief Human Resources Officer. She is a New Englander, originally from Massachusetts, went to college in Providence, Rhode Island, then to the Midwest, my native region, for higher degrees, professor of political science, and now here moving and shaking at Arizona. Speaking of movers and shakers, this is Xavier Gutierrez, who is the president and CEO of the Arizona Coyotes, the NHL team. In Michigan, we didn't think of Arizona for hockey, but Arizonans have. And seems to me you've done a lot in your career, including working for the NFL. So you've got baseball to go and basketball. And,
yes.
And Javier is a Californian, originally from San Jose. Eric Grossman is a legal, we used to say, Chief Legal Officer and Chief Administrative Officer at Morgan Stanley. And I was amazed to read that he, before Morgan Stanley, was a partner at Davis Polk. You must have been a baby partner, a child prodigy. And Eric is a New Yorker, pretty much. I thought that you three should make each should make an opening statement, in a way, about this business of reshuffling. And one of the things I was thinking of is the world is always in flux. It's always in a time of transition. I'm sure everyone and every time says, oh, the world is changing. We're in a reshuffling. Is what is happening currently a response to the pandemic? Or is it part of the ebb and flow of life, if you know what I mean? Just go down this murderer's row right here. Please start, Javier.
So
say whatever you like for an opening shot.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So first and foremost, thank you for the invitation to be here, to Mary. This is wonderful. So what is a hockey guy doing up here? By the way, I can't skate. I have never played hockey. I think I am a perfect example of what I would hope to talk about today and why I sit here. So during COVID, I was sitting as a partner at a very large private equity firm in Santa Monica, California, and I got a phone call from a friend of mine who said, I just bought a hockey team, and I think you're the guy to run it. And I said, yeah, I don't think so.
But do you have such friends, by the way? Just wondering.
And he says, no, hear me out. He says, it's not going to be about the coolness of sports, and it's not going to be about the business of sports, even though we had some business ideas to turn around this organization. Says, I want to create an organization that stands for more than winning. I want to bring a Stanley Cup to the Valley, but I want it to stand for more than winning. I want it to stand for being an organization that is beloved. And thus began a conversation around purpose and impact. And when I think of the Great Reshuffling, I think about what everyone else out there is thinking about constantly when they think about their careers, which is, how do I create a career that is both rewarding, but rewarding in a way that's not just about financial rewards, but also about meaning and purpose and impact. And thus, my wife Jerica, my son Javi, who are here, we packed up our stuff. We left Los Angeles. My wife had never lived outside of Los Angeles in her life, so quite a big ordeal. But we left because of this ideal around impact, around leveraging the power of sports to make a difference in people's lives. But I think as we have this conversation, it really is an example, and I'm a personification of the conversation that I'm constantly having with people in the workforce, which is finding meaning and purpose beyond just the job at hand, the task at hand. And so when I was asked to participate, I just shared my story. I said, I'm here because, yes, we want to win, and we'd like to build a brand new, sports and entertainment district in Tempe, Arizona. But we really also want to make a difference in the community around us, and we want to leverage this incredible power of sports. And so in some ways, I am the example of what I am seeing being part of this great reshuffling, of focusing on purpose, focusing on impact, and then we'll get into a whole other conversation around inclusion, which is definitely part of our strategy and definitely another part of the conversation that I hear now that I think people are reimagining what their career should be about.
Helena Rodrigues.
I love that story. I'm also a fan of hockey, so I'm thrilled to have hockey here in the desert.
Can you skate, by the way?
No.
Me neither. Yeah.
Never skated in my life. I think I tried once as a child, and it is hard stuff. It is very, very hard stuff. But when I think about the Great Reshuffling, this will mirror a little bit of what you said. I think about options, and I think about people discovering their options. So to your question, Jay, I think it's both a response to the pandemic, and it was coming. For me, people are looking at their employer and wanting a very different contract. The employer-employee contract has forever changed as a result of the pandemic, and that is a very good thing for people to want more, to demand more, to have higher expectations. And it's even more important for employers, for organizations to respond. So I think people started thinking about, how are they spending their time? What are their earnings? What are they seeking out of life? And they want to work for organizations that are having an impact, as you said. And it turns out there are lots of organizations that are doing good in the community, doing good for the society. At the University of Arizona, we are educating the future. We're literally solving the world's problems through our research endeavors, and that's exciting. But we can even do better than what we're doing now in terms of what we're providing our employees, particularly when we talk about inclusion, ensuring that our organizations are places where everyone feels welcome and everyone feels like they can have an impact, that they have what they need to do their best. So again, the Great Reshuffling for me is people rediscovering their options and going after them. And we now have a significant charge as leaders of organizations to respond and to continue to do better for the future.
Eric Grossman.
First off, yes, thank you for having me here. This term, the Great Reshuffling, I used to call it the Great rotation. I called it the Great Rotation in my head about a year and a half ago because I was scared. You know, I've felt since I graduated from law school that I had found my personal calling as a lawyer. I really loved my.
What a thing in life to find your personal calling. Boy,
I really loved I really loved practicing law, and when I went to Morgan Stanley 17 years ago, and I've continued to I still practice law. I continue to practice law, and now I do it in a personal, a professional services firm. Right? We don't make anything at Morgan Stanley. We're just human capital delivering ideas for our clients. We have their secrets. We have their life savings. We have their family inheritances, and our business, like my prior businesses, it's founded on trust. Your clients have to trust you, and all of us who go to work have to trust each other. So the Great Resignation, the loss of human talent from law firms and from financial services firms during that period, it scared me, because I think this particular line of work is not done well remotely. It's not done well with a transient workforce. You can't build trust with your clients and with each other if you're constantly turning over your workforce. And we indeed at Morgan Stanley, since the pandemic, we've turned over roughly 50% of our workforce. So roughly 40,000 new employees in the last 3.5 years, workforce of about 80,000. Now, a lot of folks do commoditize work, and that workforce turned over the most. And we grew significantly during that time period also, because it turned out, notwithstanding our panic in the spring of 2020, it turned out to be a pretty good time to be in financial services. But I was worried. And so the way I made myself feel better was that we were going through sort of a transient period of a couple of years in which the people who were making choices, driven in part by the dynamic of the pandemic, where everyone was working from home. And I think for a lot of people, a revelation of all that's great about not commuting 2 hours a day and not being on airplanes all the time, and trying to figure out, okay, well, how can we take what was good from that time period but replace it with people who still wanted to be at the firm, so that we could deliver on our mission in years ahead. So I felt like the great, whether it's reshuffling or rotation, suggested that the folks who left would be replaced over time with others who wanted to pursue what I view as this noble profession, either whether it's financial services or lawyering. And I think that's proving to be the case, but we're early in this backfill, if you will. We're early in the process, and I think what we've got to apply all the lessons we've learned about what people want and expect from their employer, over the next couple of years, to make sure that these rates of turnover are not what they've been the last couple of years.
Well, let's get into this business of remote working and non-remote working, and I have maybe a couple of stories or a couple of points, and I'd love to hear from you three. Last night at the center's reception, I was talking to some young people, and I was talking about Zoom. And I said, when I was growing up, there were futuristic TV shows and movies that had something rather like Zoom, where there was a screen and a person was talking to another person maybe 1,000 miles away, and it seemed so cool. And it's here. It's now here in our own lifetimes. And people complain about it, and which I understand. For a long time, I've said YouTube is the greatest invention since the wheel, but I think Zoom is up there. But of course, there are these problems. And I work at a magazine, and very few people go into the office now. They don't even live where the office is. They live in other states. I think in a couple of cases, other countries. And I rather like working from home, but then I'm at a certain stage in my career. And when I was starting out at the Weekly Standard in Washington, D.C., it was marvelous. It was like sometimes a frat house in there. I learned from these experienced journalists, Bill Crystal, Fred Barnes, Christopher Caldwell, John Podhoretz, others, I just learned so much, and there was debate and hilarity and spontaneous things. And I feel that younger people are missing out on that. I have had it. I'm sort of okay. I had that opportunity. It was marvelous. So I'm all right at home in my PJs or whatever. But I think that the younger people are getting kind of ripped off. I'll say a final thing before letting you talk. Last night, Charles Mishkin here, I think I saw him. He was saying yesterday at the reception, he said about his law firm, can't get the associates to come in. With that, I'm going to shut up and turn to Xavier Gutierrez. Say whatever you like in response to any of that.
So Zoom is both the best thing that happened to our industry and the worst thing that happened. So I'll start by saying that I took this job on June 8th, 2020. And I was announced as the new president CEO on Zoom. And that was not what I expected. I also share the story that I did not meet a single player for 2 seasons. I only met them over Zoom because at the NHL we have these protocols where you either on the sports side or on the business side. And I figured the CEO should be on the business side, especially since I really couldn't skate and couldn't help them out. So it was difficult. It was a challenge to be connected. And even now, this season is really the first season where we have reconnected our players with the community, with the fans, with the people who this is their idols, the people that they look up to.
Wonderful.
It's been wonderful. It's been incredible, and it's been incredible for the players. It's been incredible for the community. And so I think that we are in an industry where you can't have this distance, right? We throw 41 parties a year, which is our games. Oh, by the way, and then there's a hockey game as well. And so for us, when you're in the live events business, when you're in the human performance business, the sports business, you really need to have people. They need to interact. They need to be together.
Are you in entertainment in a sense, sports and entertainment? Is that an
Absolutely.
insulting word to a sport?
No, not at all. I do believe that it is an entertainment. I mean, it's the entertainment of competition, but it is entertainment. And people show up and they want to have emotion and passion, and they want to be connected. And so I think that's been the downside. Now, I will tell you the upside, however, and I'm fairly new to this role, is we have scouts around the world. We have 30 plus scouts. We have one of the largest scouting departments, and they never felt more in tune and in sync. And for an organization that's rebuilding through the draft, through young players, through performance development of young players around the world, being connected in that way and in sync has been incredible for us.
Javier, at headquarters, I assume there's headquarters.
Yes.
Do people come in or?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, no, absolutely. So we live in Arizona, which had some lax, I think, approach to the protocols of COVID. We have had our offices open the entire time that I've been here.
Oh, my darn. Huh.
Yep. And I left California, in which that wasn't the case. I do believe that it was better. I do believe that for me, clearly having interaction with people in a new role, in a new city, in a new industry was absolutely critical. But I understood the concerns around health. We did give people the option to work from home on certain sort of managed approaches. If you were a coach, it was very difficult for you not to come in and be with your players. And we operated in a bubble. I don't know if many of you know, I know Eric is a huge hockey fan. We had our first season in a bubble in which our players, and by the way, they had stories in which they felt in this dystopia future where they literally saw the regular world on the outside behind these fences, and they were within the confines of the bubble in Edmonton and in Toronto. And so we finished our first season with players who had been away for, I believe it was 75 days from the rest of the world. And quite a difficult challenge for them. And I don't know if we could actually, I know the Players Association would not go for that again because it was very difficult on the mental wellness of a lot of those players.
Helena, I was walking around campus today and made me want to enroll, in B18, the whole so-called bricks and mortar world of real students and sports and extracurricular activities and theater and conversation. And I know online education is wonderful, especially if there's not an alternative. And I know it can be very much affordable, and the cost of
Accessible.
higher education is so, yeah. But there was something wonderful about being on campus today and just seeing college life.
It's one of the perks of the job, to be around young people and feel that energy, and to be part of such a diverse community. I have no typical day, but in one day I could be talking to someone at the Poetry Center, and at the next Zoom or in-person meeting, I'm talking to someone that works on our telescopes. And so I'm with you. Not just engaging with those people, but seeing the brick and mortar buildings, and coming into contact with people. It's pretty fantastic. I think since the pandemic, I don't take any opportunity to engage with my professional colleagues for granted. That said, I have to say, so I signed my offer letter late January of 2020.
Oh, geez.
So a little different, and I remember being in the basement of the student union with our provost and talking about sending everyone home and being in complete denial. This can't be really happening. We're not really going to shut down.
Same, yeah.
And telling my staff that I wanted them all to go home, but I was going to keep coming to the office, and I would see them all in a couple of weeks. There was no need to pack up their office.
I remember a couple of weeks.
We
yes.
all thought it was
Yeah.
a couple
2-3 weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
But what's magical about that time for me when I look back on it, there were a lot of hard nights. I remember one day I think I had worked 18 hours straight. It was an incredibly difficult time, but for my team, and many of my colleagues feel the same, I had never seen our engagement with the campus community as high as it was. So what Zoom did was really open up lines of communication that hadn't been there before. Either there were real barriers or artificial barriers for people coming together that technology allowed us to tear down. And so we were engaging with people a lot more than we had been before. And that engagement, fostered a lot of positivity. People wanted to be part of helping all of the various efforts that were going on. At no other time in my professional life do I remember consuming so much information and yet having so many unanswered questions, but there was a unity to all of that I really appreciated it. And so we reimagined our work in HR completely as a result of that time. And today, my team, about 90 professionals, the majority of them work either a flexible or completely remotely. And it's all based on the job. There's some jobs that have to be done in person. I go to the office 5 days a week, and I wouldn't have it any other way. For me, that's what I need. But when we do bring people together, we're very deliberate about it. So I do believe you have to bring people together. I do think that to ensure that you're having really good collaborative work, that you're soliciting input, problem solving together, there is a magic about doing that in person that can't be completely replicated.
I was going to ask you, does Zoom count as coming together?
Yes.
Or is it 3/4 of the way there, and you're not perfect, but
I think it
a
can.
decent second best?
I think it can.
At least you can see the person on the phone. Yeah.
It's about how you use that time. It's not perfect, and it's not an exact replication of in-person contact, but a lot can be done over Zoom. I was talking to colleagues in other parts of the country that I wasn't seeing or talking to as frequently, and we were working together in ways that we hadn't before. And we've continued that. And I think time will tell if we'll continue to do that. We are coming together more in person, so it doesn't replace human in-person contact, but it can be a very useful tool to do really good work.
I mean,
And
can I jump in? Is that all right?
Please.
Just if you take this panel alone, we could have done this panel during COVID. I sat on panels, I'm sure we all did like this during COVID. But all of the conversation, you and I would not have ridden together in an Uber on the way over here together.
Yeah.
We would not have chatted about the New York Rangers and the New York Mets and the Los Angeles Dodgers beforehand. So
This man hiked all morning, by the way.
you'd come on the Zoom, and you'd sort of do, we
Few
can answer all these
pleasantries.
questions.
Yeah,
We'd
yeah.
answer all these questions. The audience would all be there watching us. We wouldn't see them. We wouldn't have the chance to
Right.
have any feedback from the audience, whether we were doing a good job or a bad job, or
put your
boring
question
them or
in
the
the
like.
chat.
So, right? So, yeah, sort of, but,
Yes.
but,
or use the reactions.
right, or a
Yeah.
little bit,
Yeah.
right, except thumbs up, but that
Yeah.
didn't come later. Remember, that was like
That's right.
as Zoom evolved. We're trying to learn what really worked, and what worked is this connectivity with people that you physically cannot connect with. So I now still will do Zoom. I have teams of lawyers all over the planet, so I can't get to Beijing. I haven't been able to get to Beijing for long, but I've got 25 people on my team in Beijing. I will now Zoom with them quarterly, and they all come on. It's quite empowering too, because instead of just talking to the 3 or 4 most senior people, you can have 15 boxes on the screen and actually spend an hour and go around and have people feel connected to me in ways that they didn't
Let me
before.
interrupt you, Eric. Pre-Zoom, what did you do?
You didn't do, you wouldn't, I would see them when I went to Beijing, which was once every 2 years.
Gotcha.
Or maybe they would come to Hong Kong if I was there. We have a bigger office and you'd meet them, but you couldn't interact with them. What we're wrestling with right now is the Zoom works when everyone's on Zoom. My own personal view is Zoom works at its best with all the flaws we've described when everyone's on Zoom. Zoom, when, if we were all sitting here and you had 2 other panelists on Zoom that were here on, which happens in meetings that we all go to right now, those 2 people they're not really part of the meeting or the conversation and they struggle. But what's happened is a lot of people now in the workforce because we also have worked with people to deliver some flexibility to accommodate whatever and they're kind of losing out a little bit because they can't quite participate in the meeting as well. We thought about saying, well, no Zoom, back to being the one on the Polycom. Remember the old days when you'd have someone on a Polycom and then they'd be like screaming, "Can you hear me? Can I ask a question?" So now at least with the Zoom, you can see them kind of waving or making a hand. But the truth is, they still take second place to the people in the room. It's much easier to, and so it's that solving for that over the next, I think, probably several years. In all, again, we're talking about large employers, is going to be, I think, a super challenge. And
I think we're still learning. Yeah.
yes, correct.
We're
Yeah.
still learning.
So these new 40,000 at Morgan Stanley, I imagine they're not all young, but many are young.
Most of them.
Are they resistant to coming in? Are they part of a Zoom or at-home
No.
generation?
As it turns out, again, I can only really speak to my group, the legal and compliance function mostly. But the interesting observation that I've seen is the last couple of years, the recent college graduates, they want to be in the office because my own sons were I have twin boys, they were class of 2020 in college, and they lost their last year of college basically, and their senior year to COVID, right? So they don't want to, and so they were thrown home, and they don't want to be at home, they want to be in the office, and we're seeing that. So a lot of our new recruits are anxious, and we're Morgan Stanley, they're ambitious, so they're type A, so they want to be in the office. What happened is we had a lot of people in COVID, what I sort of view as kind of within their, somewhere between 3 or 4 years and 10 years. So not the senior most people, sort of in middle management people, who during COVID, if they lived in the city, they moved, or in the big cities, they bought a house maybe outside the city. This is largely a New York thing, and they got used to walking the dog and taking the kids to school, and they built nice home offices that worked for them. And they had I think they got a lot of personal balance out of not being in a car 2 hours a day or on a train 2 hours of the day. And they really resisted giving that up. So we had a significant push-pull last year to get those folks to come back to work, because we kind of wanted a lot of them back to the office, not back to work. You got to be careful. They were working back to the office, and a lot of them, they left because they didn't want. There were plenty of other industries that were willing to employ them working from home they've all been replaced, which is why we have so many new employees.
Your
We've had
great
this rotation, correct. They've been replaced with folks. We still have some, in my group, 60% of I have about 2,500 people in legal and compliance at Morgan Stanley. 60% are full-time, which means sort of 4-day-ish. Fridays are still, Friday has been adopted as a work-from-home day for most
Now, is that
people.
work in quotation marks, or Friday is a little bit fuzzy?
It's
Sort of
well, look,
casual Friday in more senses than one, or?
I mean, you start calling around at 3 o'clock on a Friday to find people. They're hard to find. They're hard to find Friday at 3 o'clock. But hey, that's okay. That's okay. Like if that makes them happy employees, because they're hiking at 3 o'clock, or they're coaching little league, or my view on this is a lot of people use the phrase work-life balance. I hate that phrase.
I do too.
It's all life. The notion that somehow work is not life is it's insane. We spend most of our time working. It's all life. So it's life, personal balance, and the balances between life and personal, they ebb and flow depending on what's going on. I mean, did I just have a child? Did I just get married? Do I have an illness in the family? Or am I young and I have nobody? I don't care about anything other than climbing up the corporate ladder. And that changes for people over time. And I think the very best companies try and accommodate that flow, provided that it works for the shareholders, right? Ultimately, we are a for-profit institution. The Coyotes, it's not a charity. They want to succeed economically, and so at a certain point, if we're not the
Stanley Cup champion,
if we're not the right place, I mean, I've said this many times. If the job is not the right job for you, then God bless. If you've gotten the job at Morgan Stanley, chances are you're employable somewhere else. If this is not the place for you, then you should go look somewhere else. I'm all for that.
I have a memory for you three, and it just occurred to me when I was thinking about the panel. I knew a woman, I want to say this was in the aughts, in the 2000s, but a scholar at the Manhattan Institute in New York. And for some reason, she gave up her office and she was going to work at home, which is not very often done. And she tried this for a while. And she said, I find this touching somehow. She got in the habit of dressing up a little, doing her hair, and get this, putting on makeup. She lived alone. And then she would sit down at her computer. She said she found it hard to work otherwise. And I think people are figuring out how to handle this new world, this situation. And I wonder, I'm sure it depends on the person, at home, do people work too little? On the other hand, do they work too much? Because there's not a separation. But I'm a writer, it doesn't matter to me. But it must matter a great deal to others to have some sort of distinction. Now I'm at work, whether it's a different room or, I don't know, a different shirt, I don't know. And now I'm not at work. What say you? Anyone?
Well, I'll jump in because I've never been in an industry, and I think, when we did our pre-call, I've had a lot of lives, as they would say.
You have? I was reading your bio.
I'm a recovering attorney. I've run a real estate private equity firm.
Take no offense at that.
Yeah, exactly. I own a bank. There's a bunch of other things in there. I point that out by saying I've never been in an industry in which connectivity is so important and sought after. Sports is about relationships.
Is that what connectivity means?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And the reason I point that out is when you're asking about this, separation, I really haven't seen it in sports in a way that I haven't felt in any other industry. You are always on. When you're at a game, you're connecting with your fans, you're connecting with your corporate partners, you're connecting with potential relationships. Whether it be agents, whether it be players' parents, by the way. Things are constant, and there is no separation. You can ask my wife, Jerica. I mean, I've been in all these other industries. I'll show up at a restaurant. It's fair game. Someone wants to come and talk about, I think the Rangers should go and get your defenseman. I go, yeah, you're right, they should. Can I eat?
Do you feel complaints? The nachos are overpriced?
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. There's, your ticket prices are a little too high. I don't like the new commute. Your parking is not so great. So there is really just a constant. And I point that out because there are lessons for other industries in the sense that when you have this, interaction that's a constant, I think it behooves you to create some of that separation, but also understand that people feel like they can have that interactivity with you. And young people in our industry are yearning for mentorship and guidance in terms of, how do I meet that next person who could help me along my career? It's very rare to have people in our industry who are there for 30, 40 years anymore. It used to be that way, but anymore. And so young people understand that and are looking for ways to be developed in that, especially given that we are in an industry in which there's constant interaction.
You've touched a nerve. You've touched a nerve. For 20, 25 years, I took young people out to lunch, interns, so-called fellows, junior employees. I was the lunch guy. I enjoyed it. Now I schedule a Zoom call now and then, and it's just because we don't live in the same cities, and something is lost. Oh. What have you to say, Helena?
People meet now more than they ever did before. I mean, I think there's great research now showing how much time we're spending in meetings, how much the workday has extended since the pandemic. So I think regardless of the modality you're working in, we are working more. So
Is that good? Or
No.
No.
it's not good. I think it's leading to really higher levels of burnout. And I think that's what prompts people to think about, maybe flexible work is better for me. Maybe being totally remote is. And I have the same worries that everyone's already articulated here. When I think back to my own professional career when it started, I've relied so heavily on good mentorship. And that mentorship happened because of in-person interactions. You mentioned trust earlier. I'm a firm believer that trust develops, and you mentioned relationships. Trust happens when people have positive exchanges. And when that frequency of positive exchanges goes up, and when you make small talk and you identify commonalities with one another, and I don't think that stuff happens as naturally in Zoom. I think it can happen in Zoom, but we've got to create it. We've got to be much more deliberate about facilitating that as much as possible. And I think it's here to stay, whether we like it or not. So, anyone in a leadership position has to figure out how to create those exchanges, those positive moments, how to build trust in different modalities. Depending on your organization and what your goals are, you're probably going to be facing a mix of that, regardless, again, of your own preference. I've had my highest turnover has been among 20 and 30-year-olds, and they are going to completely remote operations. They're also going to the private sector, and in some cases, doubling their salary. So I think for me, I have to think really deeply about what is it that I offer that's distinct at the University of Arizona.
Helena, if I may, are there a lot of people eager to take their place when they leave? Do you have lots of applicants, or?
I think from an applicant perspective, we have stayed pretty healthy. I think when I look at quality of applications, I think there's some differences there, pre and post-pandemic.
Little fall off?
Yes. But I think, the challenge remains. What makes me distinct at the University of Arizona? I'm not going to be able to pay what J.P. Morgan Chase pays, or maybe the Arizona Coyotes too, I don't know. So what do I offer that's distinct? And I think for younger professionals who want to have a positive impact, who want to be part of a mission-driven organization, we're not the only show in town.
Yeah.
The thing about the pandemic for certain industry sets, it was a paradox, right? If you go back in your mind, if you can, to March, April of 2020, we thought the economy is going to completely tank and that there's going to be legions of people out of work. What happened, thanks to, my view, governmental intervention at the beginning, the economy roared. The economy roared in 20 and 21, and certain professions, human resources, law, finance, had activity levels that had not been seen before. And those activity levels were fulfilled by lots of young people all of a sudden working at home. And the line between home and work was blurred, and the business day was blurred. You started 7 o'clock, and so normally when you'd maybe be out walking the dog or whatever, no, the Zoom started at 7 in the morning, and people worked. And I think what also happened is, we've had other busy periods in our industries, but you'd be super busy at the office and you'd be with other people who were equally miserable, working crazy long hours. Instead, we had
certain
people
solidarity.
solidarity in the misery. When I was a young associate, sitting in a conference, I remember this, sitting in a conference room reviewing documents with everybody else eating Chinese food. Like that's what you did, and you felt, okay, at least the misery loves company. But what was happening is everyone was at home, and a lot of people were at home with their parents or their siblings, and the people are watching them on Zoom all the time. We're like, are you out of your mind? Why are you doing that? And watching these, and so I think a lot of people all of a sudden had other people in their lives telling them, this is not sustainable. And so resignation levels went sky high in those industry sets. A lot of people are like, I need to do something different because my mom is telling me I need to do something different. And whereas mom before had no idea what was going on when you went to the office. And I honestly think that certainly happened in law and finance. 100%. And so those folks have moved on. But again, back to a lot of them, the cooling of the job market, and a sense here that we're not, I don't believe we're in a recession. I don't actually think we're going to have a recession. You probably are definitely not having one here in Arizona. But the job market is cooling. We are seeing remember I talked about we turned over 50%, but attrition rates for the last 4 months have plummeted to historical lows. People are not leaving now because they're worried because there's just not demand in the market. HR is still very hot, though.
Very hot.
HR very hot. It just is, because everything we've been talking about, HR professionals are the ones who can help companies manage
We
this
solve
transition.
everyone's
So,
problems.
yes,
I don't know
correct.
if you've heard that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
We
Can I have your
haven't
number,
solved-
Elena?
Future career paths, I think human resources is going to, has really, if I think about our company, the role of human resources has changed significantly over the last 3 years in ways that I think we would not have predicted.
But it's interesting. Do you know what's talked about most, at least among my colleagues across the country, other chief human resources officers, private and public sector? We worry there's no pipeline.
Yes.
When we look at our teams, nobody wants our job.
Yep.
That's our reality now, which is very scary.
Yep.
So.
When we were thinking about this panel and doing a little prep, we talked quite a bit about employee expectations of employers, and maybe even employee demands, the kind of situation they wanted. That seems to me relatively new, because when I was growing up, I think it was more the employer who told you what he wanted, or they wanted. And I wonder a little bit, this is slightly off the beaten path, but I wonder what role the social media played. Because I see so many people want to construct, or at least portray, these sort of wonderful lives, these Instagram lives. And I'm thinking of my father, who said when I would complain about work or say it wasn't perfect or something went wrong, he'd say, that's why they call it work, it's not play. Okay. And I'm all for higher standards, believe me. But I just sort of find it interesting that employees are in a position, if they are, to say, Joe, this is what I want. And if you can't offer it, I'll go next door to the next state or whatever. So I have no narrow question, but speak in any way you want about the idea of, this sounds a little bit zero-sum, but I was going to say, who has the upper hand? Is it an employee's market or employer's market? The answer, as usual, is probably, it depends. Take from that what you like, Javier.
Well, I have a slight different take on it in that
Please.
It's not just social media. I think social media is the platform that really allows this entrepreneurialism of young people. They do fundamentally believe that there is other opportunity for them, and they have not bought in fully to the, I have to work my way up. And the reason they haven't is because they see so many young people having success. When you talk about the public to private sector, in the private sector, you're seeing young people create companies, have a lot of success in a way that I think technology, social media allows them to, put out there even more. So I think that what it is there's a constant, I guess, reinforcement that there's other options out there. And so thus, a conversation thus gets generated about, so then what do I want from my everyday life?
Other options for the talented,
For the talented.
ambitious?
Yes, absolutely. For the talented, I see it, right? We tell people all the time, you are in an apprenticeship program, right? You need to learn how to, sell tickets or sell corporate partnerships in order to eventually be the head of an organization like this. You need to know the sales part. You need to know the fan development, the client relationship component.
We used to
of
say
it.
start in the mailroom. That's a famous
Absolutely.
thing. Yeah.
You know what I see? Well, I hear you, but I just saw two guys over there start this company that does fan experiences, and now they have 17 teams lined up, right? And so you're hearing that come into the conversation, and thus, I get a lot of young people who show up and say, so what are we doing that makes this the place I want to be? And that's when we have conversations around impact and purpose. We have conversations around what are we doing to bring in diverse voices into the seat of decision making, which is definitely part of the conversation that I'm hearing more and more of. You're hearing not so much demands as it is questioning, as you said, questioning why should I spend the 20 hours of my day doing this task if I have other options in which maybe I'm the one who's dictating what those tasks look like, or I'm the one who's dictating what we're going to value or not value. And I think that is a very different discussion. You've always had ambitious young people. Trust me, I think I was mentioning to Eric, I dropped out of Stanford Law School because in the late 90s, it was the dot-com boom. If you guys remember that, everybody was starting a dot-com. Every 20-year-old that I knew, especially in Silicon Valley, they had a something .com idea.
You were
I
in the
worked for
heart of it all.
I was in the heart of it all, and so we heard it. So this isn't that isn't new. What's newer, I think, is that there is more opportunity to create that success, and there is more of a feeling that maybe going to Morgan Stanley isn't going to be the way that I find the financial success or professional development success. It used to be, when I
You
graduated
could be
from college.
chief legal officer.
Yeah, there was always the move, right? What was the move? McKinsey, medical school, investment banking. There were these tracks. Now, I think the tracks have been wide open.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The only thing I would
Hang
say,
on a second. Sorry, Javier, I'm nosy. When you're up to, did you start a .com or go to a
Yes,
.com?
we did. Yes, we did. It's you can look it up on Netflix. Unfortunately, we had a camera following us. We started a company called GovWorks. So in 1998, a friend of mine got a parking ticket in New York City and couldn't pay it online. Pay your parking ticket online, right? Which now everybody can do that.
yeah. No, I was just gonna say, I think the only danger in conversations like this, which I'm as guilty of this as all of us, is that the workforce is not a monolith, and young people are not a monolith. And so,
That's true. Yeah.
so I got a question today. I was at the law school at Mr. Mundheim's class, and I got a question about, what are you finding in Gen Z or millennials in terms of, and I said, you still find everything in every one of these, these generational classifications. Yeah, sure. Is this generation more like on a journey looking to figure out what they wanted to, sure, yes, I guess they probably are. But there's still enough super type A, ambitious, I'll work 60 hours until, type who are just wired that way. And if you're an employer of choice, you have you have the ability to hire. We get, like, for our investment banking program, which is what like college kids want. I don't know why, but they want to be investment bankers on Wall Street. And we have 20 applications for every one spot. 20 and we will always have 20 applications for one spot. So now they come, and a lot of them after 2 or 3 years are like, okay, I made a wrong choice, but that's okay. The model is completely dependent on them leaving. So we just hire more of them.
Right.
So like so I think I do think there are some, it's important to think about what what you do. I think in professional services organizations, whether it's human resource or running a team, like the players are coming in. Like, you know, the trader, like we had scores of people who didn't have the choice during COVID. They had to come in. They sit in front of 20 computer screens. They make markets. Think about companies that make stuff. Like I used to talk about this. I get on these calls with all the general counsels during COVID, and we're talking about, like, you know, whether people are in the office or not. And a bunch of people who, general counsels of, like, think companies that make stuff, you know, anything from jet engines to pharmaceuticals, are like, well, look, our whole so-called blue collar workforce is in. How could we not be in? We're all going to work from home and be walking the dog at 5 o'clock while they're still on the assembly line. And so I think it's important to understand that company to company, even in companies in the same sector, if you look at look at law firms, for example, or big banks, we've all taken different approaches to the importance of being in the office or not, often based on the view of senior leadership, right, who have decided what's good for them or not, and then passing that and transmitting that down into the organization. So in Silicon Valley, all the leaders of the major tech firms decided, you know what, it's great to run this big company from Maui. So then if you've decided you're going to run this big company from Maui, well, then you need to tell everybody else, guess what, you can do your job from Maui too. And lo and behold, you've got legions of people who work from home and so I think people are rethinking that, because it's hard to build a culture when no one goes into the office at all. So I think I think the what are we calling it? Not the rotation, the whatever.
Great
Great
reshuffling.
reshuffling.
And I think we're in the teeth of it right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to play out for the next at least the next 5-10 years.
But it's interesting, you make me think about among American research universities, just informally, when we look at the institutions that required everyone to come back as early as the summer of 2020, they have been much more successful in really reestablishing pre-pandemic expectations, norms, and really tout them as successes. And those institutions that were much more hesitant to bring back in-person operations are really struggling with, you know, what did we learn? What do we want to continue? And what do we want to, you know, stop? I think they're really struggling. Just my own observations.
Take a walk down the business district in San Francisco, and you will see the struggle is real there.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of the impact on the community of people not going to the office.
Elaborate.
Have you been to San Francisco downtown?
I've read. Yeah, it's encampment after encampment. Yeah.
Well, the business community has abandoned, because everyone's working from home, they've abandoned what used to be one of my favorite places to go.
Of course.
Was downtown San Francisco, people going in and out of work, the cable cars going by. Sure, some homeless people and stuff like that, and that you understood that was part of, but there was like an energy, a vibrancy to downtown.
It wasn't
San
a
Francisco.
giant Bowery. So to speak.
Correct.
So who or what is going to occupy those buildings, by the way? TBD?
I don't know.
You were saying earlier, Eric, if I heard you correctly, if bosses want their employees to come in, they should, right? Is it okay for the boss to be in Maui where the worker bees are at the office, or how much does that matter?
Well, I mean, bosses are entitled to certain prerogatives because they.
Bosshood has privileges. Yeah.
Right. But, you know, I mean, the axiom, you lead by example, is, I mean, it's an axiom for a reason. And so if you're the CEO of a company and you don't go in the office, I think you have no right to expect that other employees will, or feel that it's an important value of the company. If, on the other hand, your CEO, you know, if, you know, the leader of the group, then my name doesn't be the CEO. We found, when we were telling people to come back to work, I was monitoring which groups were listening to the dictate, and because there was a lot of resistance from the people I talked about who had houses in the suburbs. And it was very clear, if the leader of the group was coming in, then the attendance rates were high, and if the leader of the group themselves were not coming in, then people are like, oh, if my boss is not coming in, why should I come in? It's just like, you know, that's the way, I don't think that will ever change. And so if you're at a company where you believe that it's important for the company's success, then I think you have to come in. And if you don't believe it is, and I think there are some CEOs who think that their company can be run completely virtually, and that this is the greatest revelation, and there are some CEOs who really believe this, then I think time will tell whether they're right or wrong.
There's this wonderful idea of matching values with employment. And I think of an old Grossman song, nice work if you can get it. And Helena, I think you used the word mission. People who believe in the mission, that's a very nice thing. I suppose that's the kind of employee you want. And I suppose we all seek that in our job. What do I believe in? What do I value? I think we want to be prosperous, nothing's wrong with that, but we also want to have a sense of doing good. You know, the old line about the Quakers in the Philadelphia area is that they did well and did good. Both things are good. So as my old boss, Bill Buckley, would say, dilate on that in any way you want, this idea of values and employment. Do you want to start, Helena? Or
Did you say Bill Buckner?
yes, the founder of National Review.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. A figure of the past, but not to some of us. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, we have institutional values at the University of Arizona, and I reference them all the time, not just in communications, but just in even everyday interactions. Are we living up to this value when we make this decision? If we choose this path, are we honoring what we say are our institutional values? And to go back to leadership, people are watching you all the time in a leadership role. I think what I wish someone had told me before I took this role, I wish they had told me just how lonely it was going to be. I feel like that would have helped to understand that. I don't say that as a complaint. I'm not sad about it. It's just a reality that you are out there on your own. You have to make decisions. You have to live with the consequences of the decisions. In a university environment, shared governance is just paramount. It's important. It's engaging every stakeholder, and sometimes for more time than you want. You have to take that all in and still make a decision at the end of it and own that decision. And if it's the wrong one, you have to own the wrong decision and be very transparent about it. That's not easy, but everyone is watching you to make sure that you're doing that. Everyone is watching if you're coming into the office. That one I agree with. I think if you want people to come in and work, you have to be there. One of the happy accidents for us in HR at the University of Arizona was our air conditioning went out in June on the first floor of our building, which required what I call our frontline folks. They have the hardest job in HR. They answer our calls, kind of like a call center. They all had to move up to where I am. And so I now walk by their offices every day. And every day, at least one of them tells me something about themselves, or I get to hear some of the calls that they're on. Or if I wear jeans on a Friday, they thank me for wearing jeans on Friday because now they feel like they can wear jeans on a Friday. To me, that's an extension of living the values, is that contact, those small but not meaningless exchanges with people every day.
Helena, when you speak of the loneliness of the job, you mean that eventually the buck stops with you and you've got to make the decision?
Not so much. I mean, decisions are hard, certainly. I think for me, in human resources, or anyone who has to deal with a high amount of confidential information, I have no one
Oh my
to talk
gosh,
to.
yes, you must. Oh, you must have reams of that. Oh,
I have no one that I can.
keeper of the Stasi files, so to speak.
Right. Which is why colleagues across the country are really important. You can divulge just enough, and they know sometimes what to say to you. But I think you have to process things on your own. You can't share that.
Secrets of the confessional.
And you've got to, I think, especially in this time where burnout levels are especially high, where people are working more than they ever had before, maybe, in whatever modality, it's really important to put on a positive face, not a false face, but a positive one. You want people to feel energized. You want them to feel like they can still have an impact. In a public institution, there are many uphill battles. In fact, my day can all be uphill battles. But if my team doesn't feel like I think we can still have a positive impact or that we can still change something for the good, then they're not going to want to come to work every day. So I think that's the lonely factor, is doing that every day, even when you feel like there might not be a way out here.
But we're all chief morale officers. I mean, that's
right.
That's what we are. I mean, I travel a fair bit because we've got people all over the globe. and often people say, well, why I was in India in December. Well, why did you go to India? So there's some problem in India? I said, well, no, it's not that there's some problem. I have 450 people who work for me in India. And I haven't
Visiting the
seen-
troops.
I haven't seen them in 4 years, and over half of them are which is true, over half of them are brand new. And so they need to go see me, and I need to explain what our mission is, and why, even though they're way down in the organization, why they're important too in the organization. This notion of morale, which back to this human connection. You can do it on Zoom, but man, it is better. I mean, I've got some great pictures on my phone of just 450 young faces. I happened to go for their Christmas party. And they hadn't had a Christmas party in 3 years in Mumbai, which is a city that's transforming through young people who see opportunity. And I came away energized from a trip like that. And so all of our jobs, in addition to making decisions, are also to inspire the troops.
Yeah.
And I personally love that part of the job.
So I have a slightly, oh, go ahead.
No, you go for
I
it.
have a slightly different take on this that I wanted to, I think, share. Because
Please.
I think it's important. So I showed up and I saw the Mandela quote, which many of you have heard about sports, right? That sports convenes and it inspires and it brings hope. And remember when I showed up, it was the middle of COVID. My season was stopped. I haven't met any of my players. I just moved into a new place. It's 120 degrees in June. It was hot. And it really set the tone for what I then saw about the power of sports during COVID. COVID really showed that sports, the impact of it to communities, to commerce, to culture. You talk about a ghost town. All these stadiums, all these arenas are this hub of economic activity shut down, right? And yet, what did we do with our arena? It became a testing site. It became a food drive, a blood drive. We did a trunk and treat for Halloween during COVID because we had a big parking lot, right? Where kids could actually use their trunk. In other words, it became this convener.
Trunk and treat.
Yeah, trunk and treat. There you go. And the reason I bring that up is because it then began a conversation, which I had hoped to have, which is, okay, so what do we stand for, right? And what are the values that we want to put out as an organization to our employees, but also to the outer world? And it really centered around the three things that we talk about at our organization, which is impact, inclusion, and innovation. Trunk and treat was something that came up because one of our employees wanted just to have the players be able to hand out candy. Well, we couldn't be with the players, so we had them stuff the candy in the trunks, and you took video of them doing that, and then the families would come and almost feel connectivity to the players, even though they couldn't touch them, right? And couldn't be around them. My point is that I do believe one of the things that we are now thinking of as the chief morale officers is, what is it that we want to convey to people about what the purpose of our organization is? At the end of the day, what do? We sell tickets, we have players, we sell popcorn, we sell corporate partnerships, we sell media rights. But we're more than that. We bring joy, we bring hope, we inspire, we're a community asset. And now I think about all these other industries I've been in thinking about what are the values that we want to put out there. And by the way, some of them could just be, we want to be the best professional service providers that are out there, right? We want to be able to give someone the best world-class education as possible. And yet, there's more to all that interaction. There's more to all that life experience. And I do think that especially young people are now asking that in part. What is my experience going to be about in whatever setting they're in?
Javier, this is not exactly our topic, but I'm abusing my position as moderator. And I'm sure you've been asked this question before, and I'm sort of tickled by it, as we say in the Midwest. So there are baseball fans, football fans, basketball fans, and hockey fans. I'm sure there are differences, right? I know hockey has come a long way from when I was young. We had Gordie Howe and the Red Wings, and baseball fans were sort of pleasant. It was like a picnic out there in the bleachers and a slowish game, and people enjoyed the afternoon. Hockey fans were maniacal. In this beautiful environment, I can't imagine anyone being that way, but how are hockey fans compared with other fans of other sports?
Passionate. I mean, they're just, and the best people to talk to are the hockey moms.
Oh my gosh.
Okay?
Yeah.
These are, fans that they drive their kids at 4 a.m. to get ice time, to just see their kid play and have joy. And that passion is just, it's another level. By the way, you all are invited to come to a Coyote game and see that for yourself. To me, the unique thing about hockey is when you're in there, live in particular, you almost feel part of the game.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because of the
Yeah.
ice. Maybe everyone's feeling a little cold. Like you're feeling a part of the action in a way. And this is no knock on any other sport. I'm a huge fan of a bunch of other, sports. But hockey is that uniqueness. And I do think when we're thinking about, this conversation, the communal component of then saying, okay, this is a wonderful experience. Now, what else is there? And I talk a lot about we want to win, but we want to stand for more than winning.
Hockey is the only sport where every player on the bench plays in every game.
Yeah.
Except for the backup goalie.
Yeah.
Every player plays.
Yeah.
Everybody's on the ice. Everyone gets a turn. Some are on the ice for longer than others, but every play. Baseball players sit. Lots of times they show up for 120 games and never see the field. In football, there's 2 players at almost every single position, but they're basically there in case somebody gets hurt. Basketball, but hockey, if you watch it, and we're off on hockey now, but
I know.
I had a hockey son, so I think it's a fabulous sport.
Are you a Ranger or an Islander or a Penguin?
Ranger.
Well, how'd you settle on that?
I was not a hockey fan growing up, but I went to college, and a small college, and where the rink is the size of this room, a little bit bigger, where I started watching hockey up close, and I was bummed that I couldn't skate either, and all my friends had played hockey either growing up or so I envy, but I loved the game.
Upstate New York thing.
Upstate New York.
Yeah, yeah.
So I loved the game, and then when I was in law school, we got tickets in 1992 to the Rangers. We were in the last row of Madison Square Garden. I could reach up and touch the top, literally, of Madison Square Garden.
I've been in those seats, yes.
And
Still $110.
And they won. No, they weren't then.
Yeah.
They were $42, I think, a seat then. And we saw them win the Stanley Cup in 1994. And I've been literally addicted. And of course, I imposed that on my 2 boys. So I made them hockey players and hockey fans. When other kids were watching like Raffy and Barney, my boys, I would put them. They had bunk beds. They were twins. And we had one of those, remember those old TVs with the VCR in it,
Yes.
And I made them watch either 1994, A Season to Remember, the Rangers, or the 1986 Mets. I'm a big Met fan, so I programmed my kids to be Met fans and Ranger fans.
That is, to use a loaded word today, indoctrination.
Yes.
Here, toward the end of our time, I have some audience questions submitted in advance. And the first one is on Eric Grossman's favorite topic, work-life balance. I think we've covered that a good deal. I want to put this question to the panel, something that Helena and I talked about earlier with adjunct professors and so on, people not fully on staff with benefits and so on. So this person's question goes like this. What trends are you seeing in your respective industries for utilizing fractional talent, 1099 talent, to fill traditionally in-house operational roles, such as accounting, HR, and other positions? What do you have to say to that, Helena, just to start us off on that?
It's going up. And it was going up before the pandemic, and I project it'll continue to increase, in part because we have a lot more individuals from the workforce that want to be independent contractors, don't want to be part of an organization. And then as the talent, competition continues, that is, as we continue to have a hard time to find the right people, it might be that that's a wiser choice for an organization to hire an independent contractor to fulfill some immediate need. It might even be a better investment over time than hiring someone permanently. But
Outsourcing was really, going into pandemic, outsourcing was really becoming a thing. And I think it's just taken off completely.
Yeah.
I will add, however, in my short time here, I don't want it to be seen or characterized as a bad thing.
Right.
It's actually given us access to, especially on the creative side, we've brought on some great people who are helping us do one thing that's really important to us, which is we want to super serve the Erics of the world, the hockey fans of the world, but we really talk about our fans in waiting and those that are young or female, diverse, that are not so much historic hockey fans, traditional hockey fans, and the independent contractors have come up with incredible ideas on the creative side, whether it be merchandising, whether it be content, series, and things that honestly I wouldn't want to invest in-house and spend a lot of money if I had to pivot out, right? And I think that trend can actually open up a significant amount of opportunity.
In the main, and maybe it's impossible to generalize, but in the main, do the independent contractors want to be independent contractors, or
They do.
both.
They do for us.
I think some do, and I think some, going back to adjuncts, which is, I would say, a very distinct population in this part of the workforce, they're disproportionately women typically when we're looking at those teaching and higher education institutions, disproportionately people of color. So I think to me that does raise some questions about whether or not people really want to be in that category of employment. But I think to Javier's point, in other cases it does offer us access to talent that we wouldn't otherwise have, even if it is just for a period of time. So I think it cuts both ways.
Well, here's a question from an audience member, but I'll put it in maybe a funny way. To young people here, there was a movie long ago called The Graduate. And there's at least one famous scene there, famous exchange, where the older man leans in to the younger man and says, I have one word for you, just one word, plastics. That's the future, plastics. It was a big moment in American cinema. And so this person doesn't put the question in quite that way, but it's essentially the same question. Do you today, you three masters of the universe, do you have a plastics for us? Sort of an industry, a line of work of the near future people might angle for if they have an aptitude? And if not, it's just a whimsical question in a way. It must depend on what a person wants out of life. It used to be tech was the hottest thing, but tech is too big a word. Let's say information technology. Lots of layoffs lately. I guess that's just part of the flux.
Can I take a pass?
Please. Oh, take a pass, you say.
Well, no, I
Oh,
take a
shot.
try,
Yeah,
sorry.
okay.
But it's not one
It
word.
is like a game show in which you can pass if you want.
It's not one word, but I think the future really is in taking care of people and taking care of the planet. You think about average ages going up, people living longer but having healthcare needs. And then you think about the changes that are here, regardless of what your feelings might be about climate change, the planet is changing, and how we respond is going to be really critically important. And I wish I could remember this study, but I remember reading somewhere that for those in kindergarten now, most of them will be in jobs that haven't even been created yet. And when I hear that, I think about taking care of people, taking care of our planet, or responding to the planet. Maybe that's a better way of saying it.
I guess the way I think about it is, for young people, you should figure out what you're good at.
Be passionate.
Well, I have a slightly different take on that. I think figure out what you're good at and do that first.
Okay.
And then you can direct your passion, whether it's towards the planet or whether it's politics or whatever your passion is, but you've established yourself as, and this is sort of like the immigrant, I'm 2 generations removed from immigrants. It was like, and I went to law school in part because my grandmother was like, you got to go to law school, you got to go to law school, you got to go to law school, it's like, go to law school. Why? Well, because, we sell clothes in a store, in the South Bronx, and that could go away at any time. So you need to have a profession. So in my head, it was always like, well, have a profession so that you're, whatever that is, so that at least you can pay for the basic cost of living. And then I've been able to pursue all kinds of other things that I'm interested in. I think that a lot of kids now are trying to figure out, can I have both? And that's great if you can hit on that holy grail of it pays the bills and I love what I'm doing. But I think if you're just chasing something that you love, I think sometimes that leads a lot of kids kind of down paths that turn out to be not successful. So I think there's a balance in there. I tell my boys all the time, well, first just figure out what you're good at, do that first, and then we can talk about what you want to do later.
Javier, a lot of sorry, go ahead, Helena.
I was
please.
say, can being good at something also be something that excites you?
Well, I mean, ideally, it's both. And I think, and in most cases it is, because I think it's hard to be good at something if you don't like what you do. I think we all know people who have jobs that they hate, and by and large, they're not particularly good at it if they hate it. So, so passion isn't there, but there are all these wonderful causes, I think, in terms of giving back to the planet and giving back to each other, and that I think are not particularly lucrative. And I think for this question is, I think the plastics thing, the question is, okay, where's the opportunity? Where's the economic, I took that question as, where is the economic opportunity in the next generation? And my view is the economic opportunity for you, young person, is what you're good at. Figure that out.
Javier, there's a person who says, this will be our finale. What is one piece of advice you would give to a college student who wants to make a positive impact on the community but doesn't know where to start? I'm glad you have that question and not me, because I'm not sure what I would say.
I think it's a profound question.
Yeah.
And I often tell people that the power of their voice is immense. And you don't have to look at it as everything you do has to save, the planet, or has to find the answer to disease or solve poverty. It's just your intentionality around impact and understanding that every person you interact with, you can impact their life. You can guide them. You can be their chief morale officer. You can help inspire them. You can just give them a thought that will lead them down a different path. And what I try to tell young people is, don't try to do everything, because your voice is powerful enough to already make that impact. Focus on that. Focus on every single day you have the opportunity to change someone's life. And I know it's hard when you're a young person, you want to solve all of the world's biggest problems. And I just constantly tell people, listen, you have a power. Your voice is very powerful. You can make a difference, and don't ever forget that part.
Even my morale is boosted. Thank you very much. Thank you. I have a public service announcement, but I know you want to applaud this panel first. Thank you. You'll have another chance to applaud, but I first want to say this on behalf of the Freedom Center. The next PDF, and I think of that as a document online that you can't alter, but the next public discussion forum of the center will be held on April 5th, which is a Wednesday, at the Fox Tucson Theater. Mary Rigdon, director of the Center for the Philosophy of Freedom, has organized a stellar panel on the topic of women's equity in sports, the fight, the scars, and the thrill of victory. On the panel will be Adia Barnes, the women's basketball coach here and an alumna of the university herself. Another alum, Catherine Bertine, a pioneer in women's cycling. She was instrumental in getting the Tour de France to start a women's race. Also, A.J. Mleczko, a two-time Olympic ice hockey medalist and an analyst for ESPN. Another analyst at ESPN, the award-winning journalist Sarah Spain. And finally, Catherine Switzer, the first woman to run the Boston Marathon. That was in 1967. So that is an all-star panel, as is this: Eric Grossman, Helena Rodrigues, Xavier Gutierrez. Thank you so much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.